Yes, the big one is upon us, and we're not talking about Joel Van Pelt or Ryan Sevier catching football passes. We are talking about the Vanier Cup this weekend, Saturday to be exact, in Hamilton, and KCU is here to break it all down. With these guys, a fresh-faced Gord Randall on the coast end, Justin Dunk right in the center of the universe. But now over to Studio C with Andrew Wadden. Andrew, lots of excitement in the conference finals, but these weekend's Bowls games were a little bit of an anticlimax.
Yeah, Jimmy, let's not let the cat out of the bag just yet, but let's just say these games paled in comparison to what we saw last weekend. Let's begin in Laval, where Laurier was in tough in front of a packed Peps. The Red Machine with their big red flag back in the national semis, and they wasted little time getting on the board. Second possession for the home side, Hugo Richard uses 10 plays to drive 100 yards with this 23-yard major to Felix Faubert-Lucier capping the drive. It's 7-blank for the red and gold. Very next series for Laval, they use the ground game to get them back into the red zone. The drive finishes with another major. This time, it's Richard to Jonathan Breton Robert. See, this time, I finally got his name right. Laval goes up by 2 scores, and they weren't done yet. They'd add a field goal and a rouge to go up by 19. They added 7 more right here as Surrey capped an 8-play, 73-yard drive with his goal line gimme. We hit the break literally with the Red Machine in complete control. Second half, Laval pumps the brakes, just slightly though. They're up 29-0, but they continue to dominate on the ground. Surrey somehow comes out of the pile and goes 34 yards right to the Golden Hawks' doorstep. 2 plays later, Richard takes it into the fake red grass for yet another Laval major, and this one is done. They were feasting on Golden Hawk in Quebec City, although that looked kind of like a duck to me. All that was left to do was to bring out the hardware. The red and gold take the Uteck Bowl and are headed back to the Vanier Cup for the first time in 3 years. Over to Calgary for the Mitchell Bowl we go. Dinos playing host to the AUS champs St. FX. X back in the national semis for a second consecutive year, while the Prehistorics are looking to make it back to the Vanier Cup for the first time since 2013. But this wasn't the start that they anticipated. CGY up 5-0 when Keon Julian Grant takes this punt back inside the Dinos 30. 1 play later, AUS MVP Tavon Cook to DeJuan Martin. Touchdown X-Men. Second Q, both sides would trade field goals under 5 minutes before the half. Dinos rookie pivot Adam Sinagra drives his squad 76 yards over 9 plays, which sets up this Joel Van Pelt major. But X would add a field goal in the dying seconds. We hit the recess with UFC up by 4. Second half and Sinagra, wait, what? Is that Jimmy? 5th-year pivot Jimmy Underdahl, who suffered what looked like a season and career-ending knee injury just a few weeks ago under center to start the Dinos' first drive of the half. And Jimmy, well, he likes what he sees early on. He hits Whitman to Muziak. That's a 33-yard pickup. Very next play, take it away, Arash Madani.
Underdahl has time. Underdahl looking end zone. Underdahl has Hunter Carl, but broken up by Mike Miller. Or was it? No, it's a touchdown.
CGY extend the lead to 11, and they don't stop there. Next X-Men series, Cook gets picked. Hunter Turnbull with the thievery. So back to Jimmy we go, and the southpaw flashes some brilliance. Once again, back to Hunter Carl. He picks up another huge chunk of real estate right there. Very next play, touchdown Calgarians. Jack McDonald, he's loving it. Underdahl in the game for less than 3 minutes, and already he's tossed 2 majors. And Jimmy, well, he's got some more. Oh yeah, late in the queue, Mika Tietz forces the fumble, and the Prehistorics get the turnover. So back to Jimmy we go.
Now Underdahl, looking home run, has Dallas Both, who gets to the 1-yard line.
That dude right there is unreal. Dallas Both with a 41-yard pickup. Very next play, it's in the house. Jesserin Antwi from a yard out, and this one is over. Jimmy Underdahl puts in one of the best performances in Mitchell Bowl history, leading Calgary back to the Vanier Cup with a decisive win over St. FX. All right, here we have it, the big enchilada, Laval and Calgary facing off for the Vanier Cup the 52nd edition of the game from the Hammer, Tim Hortons Field in lovely Hamilton, Ontario. This is a rematch, of course, of the 2013 game, which was played at the home of the Rouge et Or, Telus Stade in Quebec City, which Laval took 25-14. However, this time they will not have home field advantage.
Now it's time for headlines.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Let's work west to east and start with our first headline. That would be the Mitchell Bowl. Gord, which Calgary team was the real Calgary team? Was it the Calgary team that we saw close things out versus UBC, or was it the Calgary team that kind of had some shaky moments against X in the first half?
I think it's more so the team that we saw in the second half against X and in that UBC game. Now, Calgary has been struggling to cover up various multitude of injuries over the last month, and they finally seem to have gotten a lot of these things settled. Now, there's still some guys up in the air. Austin Hartley's a big question mark for this week. Woodson is a question mark. There's still some banged up guys in that offensive line, and Jesher and Antwi's been in and out the last month. But they seem to be starting to get it together, and that quarterback change for them proved to be huge and sparked them a little bit. And you're always at danger of a bit of an emotional letdown in these national semifinals. And I really wonder, Jim, if that's really what was going on in the first half with Calgary there.
For me, watching that first half against St. Francis Xavier made me worry a little bit about this Calgary team going up against a stout, classic, old-time Laval Rouge et Or squad. There was some talk going into the Uteck Bowl that this was maybe not your classic Laval team in terms of smash mouth running the football and playing strong defense, but this Calgary Dino team is going to face a Laval team that does not make mistakes and shoot themselves in the cleats.
We will cover an aspect of this later in Triple W 2K, but how manageable are the injuries with the Dinos? First of all, I'll send it over to you, Justin.
Well, it's going to be tough because they have some key guys out of the lineup, and you really need to be at full health going against this Laval team that just seems to be able to roll so many guys through there. Look at Laurier. They lost their starting running back, Lavondre Gordon, early in that football game. It sort of sent shockwaves through the rest of the team. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Calgary, but they need to find a way to get their best players on the field.
But you know what? This is something that we said about 3 weeks into the Canada West season, is that whoever emerged from the Canada West might have been feeling a little worse for wear by the time they got to this stage. And I think that's what we see with the Calgary Dinos right now.
I think we do too, Jim. And I think the real key for them injury-wise is staying healthy in the offensive run game. That includes offensive line, also includes Jesher and Antwi, as I previously mentioned, because they did not put up much in the way of a run game against the St. FX defense that is not on the level of Laval based on all evidence we've seen. And that's going to be the real key for Calgary, because if they can get a running game going, then they don't have to put as much on the backs of presumably, although we might talk about that a little bit later, presumably Jimmy Underdahl, who's on a wonky knee himself as the quarterback. So that's going to be the real key for Calgary with this whole injury situation.
Lots of respect will go out to Jimmy Underdahl, as Gord mentioned, but what about the defensive adjustments made by Calgary defensive coordinator Tom Higgins to take away what was working for the X-Men in the second half, Justin?
It really helps to have a guy that has so much CFL experience, and you knew that the halftime adjustments were going to happen with a guy like Higgins on that staff, and he did them just right to help shut down that X-Men passing game that seemed to be going pretty well in the first half under Tyvon Cook.
Well, I'm always partial to the front line and the trenches, and that's where things really changed for Calgary in the second half, as that talented defensive line started to take over in that trench and started to overwhelm St. FX up front, not allowing Tyvon Cook to sit back in the pocket and pick them apart downfield the way he did in the first half. That was the real adjustment, is that I don't know what spurred them on, but Calgary's guys up front in particular just really came to play in that second half, in my opinion.
Now let's go to the Uteck Bowl, which proved to be as bleak as a Martian landscape for the Laurier Golden Hawks. Laval's first scoring drive in terms of execution, play selection, and physically asserting themselves on the opponent was either a thing of beauty or a harbinger of certain death, depending on what side of the ball you were on. Justin, what was your impression from the sidelines?
That first scoring drive from Laval was surgical. Now, it seemed to me there was a lot of easy throws out there for Hugo Richard, and that the Laurier DBs were giving up a lot of cushion, and that's something that was a little bit different that we saw from them in their playoff run, and obviously the big comeback against Western as well. But that certainly got the Laval offense rolling. Now, we can't forget that Laurier did get them off the field on their first possession, and I believe that Golden Hawks offense could have put together a first down or two, flip field position, that whole game might have been different.
I agree entirely, and not only did that strategy on the first drive allow Hugo Richard to get into a rhythm for Laval, it also allowed that offensive line to get into a rhythm and get used to what had been an overwhelming Laurier front. And they were what was seen as one of Laval's biggest issues mid-season was that offensive line. They've really hit their stride in the last month, including impressive performances against Montreal and now an even more impressive performance against Laurier defensive front that has been the strength of their team. That was the impressive side of the ball for Laval. We expected that Laurier would be hard-pressed to put up a lot of points against Laval when their offense was on the field, but with Laval's offense on the field, putting up points with, I'd say, relative ease, that was the biggest positive development for Laval moving forward out of this game.
Shut down D or D shut down? Well, it was the latter as far as Laurier was concerned. This was a game that I thought Laurier had a chance in, but that Laval start that Justin mentioned was key for them. Do you think it'll be key for Laval to start as strong in the Vanier Cup?
I would say so. Now, they aren't going to have the crowd behind them the way they did this last weekend. And when you are facing an underdog on the road, best way to get that game off on the right foot is to give them no ideas that they are going to pull a road upset early on. Laval took them right out of the game, got the crowd behind them, and that was just about that. This one being in a neutral site is going to be a little different, but they are facing a team like Calgary that is much like Laurier, fashions themselves a pretty stout defensive front with some ball hawks in behind. It'll be interesting to see what Laval does to attack that Calgary defense and get the ideas out of their mind that they might be able to pull this one off.
What Calgary needs to do, I believe, is come out and get a lead early on. That Laval team is used to being front runners and playing in front. That's what we saw against Laurier. Now, it's different when they're playing Montreal and they're sort of used to that pace and grind of those games against the Carabin. But if Calgary come out and, for lack of a better phrase, punch them in the mouth and get a field goal or a touchdown early on, it could be totally different. I said could be, so let's see.
And I think that Calgary would probably benefit from taking a similar approach to what Laval did this past weekend, Jim, in that Laval's thing has always been to force you to throw the underneath and rally up and then dare you to beat them deep while they've got the ears pinned back on the pass rush. If Calgary can open them up underneath and then go deep later on, I think that that's going to be the way that they need to open Laval up and get things moving on the offensive side of the ball. And again, we talk about rhythm with quarterbacks. Jimmy Underdahl still on what has to be less than 100% of a knee, needs to be able to get into a comfortable throwing rhythm early on as well.
Page 2, it could be page 3, 4, 5, 6. Man, those games took a long time to play. I like a lot of football, but 3.5 hours plus, those games are a major commitment for the casual fan. What would you do to shorten the running time of some of these games?
Well, it's tough because you have passing predicated offenses. The late game in particular took forever. I was coaching a high school football game. We went out for early outs for warm-up. I came back in 20 minutes later. When I left, there was 3.5 minutes left in the game. When I got back, there was still almost a minute left in the game. I have no idea what was going on there, given that it was garbage time. But the problem is, like I said, these teams are passing every down. And Jim, I don't know that there's an easy fix for fixing that.
To me, if the games were close, we wouldn't be talking about this as an issue because everyone would be focused on a close, tight game down the stretch and what were going to be the crucial plays in those games. So to me, it's just have a better game, and I don't think people would be too worried about the time.
Yes, now it's time for Weekend Warriors, and one of the most prolific pass catchers in the history of the CJFL stepped up on the bowl stage with a 7-catch, 139-yard day. Whitman Tamuziak has been asked to do a lot, dropping into the spot once occupied by the academically ineligible Rashawn Simonize. With a number of injured pass catchers, including team leader Austin Hartley on the mend, we are finally getting to see what Tamuziak is all about in November.
For me, my first Weekend Warrior, maybe one of the most obvious ones, it's Jimmy Underdahl, the well-respected fifth-year senior and a guy who I was reminded after the game, was playing his last possible game at home at McMahon Stadium, was able to come off the bench for the Dinos at the half and provide them the emotional spark that they needed. His numbers were excellent. In a half of work, he went 11 for 16 for 217 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Those 2 touchdowns were early in the third quarter. They came within about 5 minutes into the third quarter, and they totally swung the momentum of that game. And more so than what he actually did with his performance on the field, which was pretty impressive, again, given that he's still on that injured knee, was the emotional boost that he gave that team. Because all of a sudden, you started to see guys with that extra pep in their step, and on the defensive side of the ball in particular, really coming after St. FX and turning that game around.
When Felix Faubert-Lucier wasn't catching passes for Laval on Saturday, he was kicking field goals and extra points as well. He took over for Dominic Levesque, who was 1 for 6 in the Dunsmore Cup, to make 2 of 3 field goals for the Rouge et Or. And oh, by the way, he had 4 catches for 86 yards in the game's opening touchdown on that dominant first drive.
Who's the boss? Hugo Richard is the boss. The 2014 Gorman winner for Freshman of the Year. Richard's game may have taken a sophomore detour last year, but right now he's playing with the confidence of knowing that 11 others have his back. 191 yards passing may not be a big deal, but running for authority 7 times for 87 yards and a touchdown is, especially when he could be saving himself up for the national championship.
Do you guys hear that? That's a fat guy touchdown alert. Joel Van Pelt for the Calgary Dinos hauled in one. That was a big score for them in the second half, and I love seeing the big guys get involved on offense. Van Pelt with the unusual stat line of recording both a sack and a receiving touchdown in this game. Nice job out there, big man.
Adam Auclair, the Laval DB, had a big-time game for the Rouge et Or on defense, and maybe had the most underrated play of the day for Laval on defense. As Laurie was driving, Osai Iguinuon, the running back for the Golden Hawks, ran inside the 10-yard line, but Auclair forced a fumble. That snuffed out any possible thought of a comeback, even though it was 29-0 Laval at the time. He also led the team with 7 total tackles, so a banner day for Auclair.
Coming up, Coach Olsen breaks down what works for the Dinos heading into their Vanier showdown.
Krown Countdown U is supported by the Guelph Griffins. Agile, mobile, hostile.
Welcome back to the studio, everyone. Let's get ready for the coach, Sean Olsen, as he talks about one of the teams dressed in red and gold.
We're heading into the Vanier Cup, and what we're going to look at this week is the play of freshman quarterback from the Calgary Dinos, Adam Sinagra. He's had an amazing sort of progression through the season from week 6 when he took over the starting position to the Vanier Cup. Let's take a look at the first play and see how he progresses. Okay, on this play here, you're going to cut the field in half to make this quarterback's read easy, and that's a good thing to do with young quarterbacks. Simple bootleg, you're going to have somebody into the flat, you're going to have an intermediate crosser, and you're going to have somebody going deep. Sinagra comes off the boot, gets his eyes downfield, checks short, and sees the intermediate crosser deep for a big play and a touchdown. Let's roll the clip. Here's the play fake. Good friend of every young quarterback. Sees the guy across an intermediate, catch, acceleration into the end zone, huge play. That's how Sinagra got started. You'll see the athleticism the Dinos loved as well. Next clip, let's take a look at what he can do with his feet. Simple zone read type of concept, but it's going to be off of a fly sweep. You got a blocker over here, and we're going to read the blitzing halfback. And now Sinagra uses his wheels. Not the greatest read here, but you can see the athleticism, and he gets into the end zone with his speed and a little dip to give him some depth to get off the edge. Let's roll the clip. So right here, you see the fly coming across, and pause right there. This is what the quarterback is reading. It's a zone read concept off a fly sweep. He's going to carry the fake down a little bit, and when he turns his shoulders, that's when he should pull the ball. The challenge here is that Sinagra makes a bad decision, which is something that is easily done on a play like this. But he uses his feet, gets out of the bad decision, and you'll see him come out here, and just a little bubble with depth gets him the edge and gets him in the end zone. Let's roll it. Right there, gets out, uses momentum, gets the edge, good block from the old lineman, and gets the pay dirt. That's what's been the difference between Sinagra at the beginning of the season and what he's doing now. You're going to see him be a pocket passer. This has been the biggest evolution. Let's take a look at this clip. Okay, right here you're going to have a real simple out double post concept on the weak side of the field. Simple play, single high safety. This inside post is going to freeze that safety. You're going to get a one-on-one down the sidelines here. You'll notice the patience Sinagra has in the pocket to look to the out and then get the ball deep. Let's roll this clip. Right here, back gets out into the flat, draws the flat defender, looks inside post, bomb down the sidelines. Great play, 45 yards in the air, touchdown. That's been the massive difference for Sinagra. That's what's gotten from a freshman quarterback that took over an offense from a fifth-year senior in Week 6, and now he finds himself in the Vanier Cup.
Now it's time for Triple W 2K, or what we want to know, Gord. Triple W 2K. We talked a little bit about it earlier in the show, but has this long Canada West season that was very competitive 1 through 6 really taken a bite out of the Calgary Dinos lineup?
It very well could have, and I've said for years that the CW schedule is the hardest week-in, week-out conference schedule in this country because there really aren't a lot of pipsqueaks, and we saw that this year with the worst team in that conference beating the first team in that conference in the regular season. As for the Calgary Dinos, they clearly have a longer injury list than Laval Rouge-or at this point in time, and the question remains, even if those lists were equal, Laval's got the depth that we aren't too worried about them plugging holes. With Calgary, we are, especially at the running back position, where Jesher and Antwi is basically the one guy, the one half of a guy left standing between them and fifth string on that depth chart. Now, the good news is that they will be traveling most of the big names that have been out, Woodson, Hartley. We don't know yet, and we won't know for most of the week whether they'll be playing or not, but that is certainly a big question floating over the Dinos' heads heading into this game.
Yeah, Robert Woodson is a big one for me. They could really use him in that back end. He's so versatile, and he's a guy that can match up against one of these Laval receivers and possibly take them out of the game. And that's the issue with Laval on offense. They have so many weapons that can beat you that this Calgary defense needs to somehow be at full strength. Those trainers got to have a big week.
Triple W 2K, can Calgary win the Vanier Cup without a robust running game? I'll throw it over to you, Justin.
I think they can, and I look back at the Vanier Cup from last year in 2015 and the way that UBC was able to beat Montreal. They came out on the very first play of the game and showed that they weren't messing around in the passing game and took a deep shot, a fade down the sideline that Michael O'Connor threw up. Now, it went incomplete, but it sent the message that they were going to throw the football and try to take some shots to open up that Montreal defense. So I think what Calgary might be able to do is sort of follow in that footsteps against the Laval defense. Open up the offense early on and try to generate a run game through the pass game.
I think they need to try and establish a run game, but either way, what's going to be key for Calgary is that they don't waste too much time trying if it's not working. They have to have a plan B ready to go in the chamber because it hasn't been a great rushing attack for the last little while. Antwi, like I said, the presumed starter for next week, is a guy who's had injury issues. So if you are Calgary, like I say, whether it works on the ground or not, you have to have plan B in the chamber, and I'm sure that offensive coaching staff will.
Okay, here's a non sequitur for you boys. It's cold, there's a short turnaround, the fans need to scramble to travel. So Triple W 2K, should the U Sports season take a hiatus until the Christmas season like our southern neighbors and play the Vanier in one of 3 indoor facilities in Canada around Christmas, Gord?
Well, you lost me once you said indoors, Jim. I think I was on board until then. But outdoor snow football, I mean, I watched that Ottawa Red Blacks Edmonton Eskimos game last Sunday, and that was so much fun. And that's what Canadian football is all about. Because dome games don't generally go down in football lore. Snow games certainly do. Now, in terms of the timing, I love the idea of doing it at the holiday break. I think part of the rationale behind having it right away is to pair it up with the Grey Cup and have it on the same weekend like a Canadian football weekend. But given that the CIS seems reticent for whatever reason to attach their Vanier Cup to the Grey Cup at all, or maybe the CFL does, I'm not quite sure, that no longer really has any relevance. So I like the idea because you're going to get university students home from their various universities in certain markets. You're going to have people with more time on their hands who can go out to these games. And I mean, if you're Hamilton right now looking at your sales numbers, you're going, okay, we need to change something here because this ain't working.
Justin, the best game ever in 2011 was played indoors. So there's something to be said for indoor football. What are your thoughts on this?
Jim, I was a former quarterback, so I tend to lean towards playing games in perfect conditions inside a dome, but we all grew up in Canada, and like Gord said, I watched that East Final against Edmonton and Ottawa, and it was awesome. The snow just brings a cool feel to the games outside, and we all grew up here. We're used to dealing with the elements, so if the game happens to be, like it is at Tim Hortons Field this year, outside, that's where it needs to be played. Now, I'm not for moving the Vanier Cup later in the year, especially around Christmas time, because families and people get so focused on being around their family at that time. And we would have the student athletes, in this case, that is, that we actually are up here in the CIS. You know, Hugo Richard left to practice last week to go to a class. I don't think you'd ever see that in the NCAA. But back on track, you would keep these student athletes on campus longer. Normally, that's a nice little break for them. And we have so many Canadian University football pro prospects that are getting ready for various all-star games, combines, north and south of the border. So I think playing the game in December would eat into that time too.
Okay, I'll start working on scheduling that postseason bowl game in Mexico then. Now it's time to take a look at predictions and point spreads. What's your point spread on this? I'm not even going to ask for a prediction because it's early in the week when we tape this. What's your point spread right now in the Vanier?
I would put my point spread for this at about 6.5 points, something like that. A little bit under a full touchdown seems right to me. Now, Jim, I know yours was in the double digits, but I just have a hard time looking at Laval's record versus Montreal. The only team anywhere close to what we assume the caliber of Calgary is that they've played so far, and I expect that this game at the very least will be close. I don't expect it's going to be a romp like last week, especially with Laval not having their infamous home field advantage. I suspect also that Calgary fans are going to travel well because they haven't been in this game for a few years as well.
So I'm with you there, Gord. I think the point spread, if it were available, say down in Vegas or some offshore illegal gambling site, would be around a touchdown. For me, I'm going to go with 8 points because I feel like the public is going to bet on Laval hard, but this Calgary Dinos team needs to show us something on a national stage. And another reason I say I think it's 8 points and maybe not double digits like Jim thinks is because Laurier had some opportunities in that game to be in it. They had some deep shots open, and if Calgary can hit those, we got a ball game on our hands.
Well, early in the week, I've got Laval as 12.5-point favorites, but as more Calgary players come into the lineup, that number could come down. If you are out in the Hamilton area, you got to get out to this game. I know a lot of Stamps fans will also be traveling to Toronto for the Grey Cup. Get on the train, get on the bus, get down to the Vanier Cup. Guys, let's get out to the game.